Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search specializes in helping small law firms in Texas hire lawyers and build great teams. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel Hare with you, and I'm excited for today's Monday Mentors episode, where we will be joined by Jason Scott and Michael Knisely of the estate law boutique Osborne, Hellman, Nebel, and Scott in Austin. Each Monday, we'll visit with a Texas lawyer with an established practice and ask them to share advice on how you can grow as a lawyer and reach your career goals. So stay with us each week for these conversations. I also want to remind you that we released our first movie verdicts episode this past Friday, where my friend and criminal defense attorney Robert Callahan broke down the 1992 classic My Cousin Vinny. We talked about what was the best cross-examination, do the defendants get off in real life, otherwise known as Robert's hot take of the episode. I go over the top in my adoration of Fred Gwynne as the judge, and of course, we give our final verdict on the movie. So check it out. It's in this feed right now. And if you want to contact me or if I can help you in any way, please email me, daniel@varsitysearch.com. You can also tweet at Daniel Hare, H-A-R-E, or send me a message on LinkedIn. Would love to connect with you there. With that, let's dive into our conversation with Jason Scott and Michael Knisely on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. All right, Jason Scott and Michael Knisely, thank you so much for being with us today.
Very happy to be here.
All right, you guys are down in the office in Austin, and I'm of course up here in Waco, and I see you're in different offices, though I know you're together down there. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. The first thing I want to start off with is to just let our audience get to know you a little bit better. And so if you would just share a little bit about what your firm does and what you do in your individual practices. And so if Michael, you want to start, and then Jason, you can follow up.
Sure. Our firm is a relatively small trust and estate boutique. We have 14 lawyers. We split, our office is almost 50-50 in terms of estate planners who do traditional Texas domestic estate planning. And then Jason and I are part of our trust and estates litigation group. Jason can maybe give some of the nuances, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah, we also have an international practice, both on the planning side and the litigation side, that is a part of what we do.
Fantastic. Well, so as you know, a lot of our audience are younger lawyers. They're kind of maybe they've been out in practice a few years, sort of starting to get the hang of it and trying to figure out what's next. I wonder if you look back in your first few years of practice, what stands out as something that you learned that has helped you in your career, Jason?
Sure. I think one thing that as a young lawyer I worried about was when I ran into a problem that I didn't know the answer to, or that I didn't know about. And what I learned over time is that it's okay not to know. That's why we have Westlaw. That's why you can do the research and take the. So not being afraid to say that you don't know, going back and verifying and doing the research. I think that's something that sometimes comes with experience, being able to be comfortable that you did something.
Sure. Michael, how about for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think the most important lesson that I learned was that you can't be over-prepared. And that is just borne out to be the case, through all my years of practice. And, sometimes you get into a routine or you think you know what's going to happen. But in our experience, the better prepared side, when we're talking about litigation in particular, usually emerges victorious. And you can't be over prepared for something, and it's better to be over prepared than under prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, is there anything that you learned later on in practice that you wish you had been told or wish someone would have shared with you when you were first getting started?
Well, to some extent, there's just a sense, and I'm coming from a litigator's perspective, of the drama of a courtroom, and everybody is human that does what we do, from the judges, to the court reporter, to the opponent. And I think the humanizing aspect of this, sometimes when you're a young lawyer and there's an aggressive person on the other side, or there's somebody who's, overbearing, realizing that everybody's human and everybody comes into the courtroom with the same human factors. I wish that I'd thought about it more, and looking back on it, it seems a little silly to be scared of some of the things that I was scared of as a young lawyer. And I think part of that comes with experiences, that you can deal with whatever gets thrown your way. You just got to recognize that everybody comes into the courtroom, wearing human skin.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Gotcha. Well, as you guys have worked over the years with younger lawyers in your firm, what are some ways that young associates can make a positive impression within the firm on their the partners maybe that they're doing work for?
Yeah,
Jason, you want to take a go with that?
Yeah, I think one thing that makes an impression on me is when they do have the opportunity to act with clients, that they're kind and patient with the clients, because what we're doing is, when you boil it down, is we're trying to help people. And more empathetic that lawyers can be, the more the associates treat the clients like they would want to be treated. That to me and an impression on me. And I watch for that in the first couple of interactions that the associates have with clients.
Now, I would add, just attention to detail is something that always makes a positive impression on me, whether it's written work product or dealing with a client or helping prepare for a hearing or anything. Someone who's there, is paying attention, and is catching those small things, that always makes an impression with me, particularly with associates, because that's a helpful attribute for them to have in furthering our practice.
Absolutely. Are there things that you've seen young lawyers do that would be wise to avoid, or maybe something that they don't know that they're doing and maybe don't get told, and it'd be a good thing for them to be made aware of?
One thing I think that's really important is to treat your support staff really well and the court staff really well. I think a lot of young attorneys, when they start practicing, forget that even though someone may be working for you, you're really collaborating, and you need everyone in your office in order to get the job done. And then also when you're interacting with the people at the court staff, that is a super important time to make a good impression.
Yeah, that's really good. And what I would say is something that sort of dovetails from that is sometimes there are situations, whether it's a courtroom or dealing with opposing counsel or dealing with colleagues, where you can get too comfortable. And this goes back to the attention to detail piece of things. I don't want to say carelessness, because it's obvious that you want to avoid carelessness, but sometimes, if you get too comfortable in a situation, you can miss some of those details. So I think it's just always being aware that, like Jason is saying, that no matter who it is, you're reflecting on the firm. And so being aware, hyper acutely aware of that, is, I think, very important. It's something that can cause a negative impression, and it can also reflect not just on you, but on your firm and your colleagues at the firm.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's really good. And you may have already mentioned it before, but if there's something else or something different that you would say to this, I'm curious, is there something, maybe a trait or a skill that those that have gone on to have successful careers, as you've watched them, maybe develop from a young lawyer to more experienced lawyer, is there something that's that those successful folks have had in common that you've observed over the years?
For me, and Jason and I work closely with our young associates and try to help train them up. the ones that are successful are really focused on how can I go that extra mile and make myself indispensable. And so it's hard sometimes to put a finger on that or communicate exactly what that looks like. But, on various projects, when the final product that's brought to you answers the question, but then also sort of sets up the following issues, that's a good example of it, I think. It's just going the extra mile, making yourself indispensable. It's something that, again, hard to articulate, but when we look at who has been successful that we've trained, they have that certain something, that we need them with us, when you go to courtroom, when you're meeting with a client, when you're preparing for a hearing, they've made themselves indispensable because they've gone that extra mile.
Yeah. And one thing I learned from the partners when I was a young associate is when you come to a partner with questions, also have proposed solutions. I will appreciate that you brought that to me, and it may lead to a discussion that I hadn't thought of, but not completely the right solution. That's okay.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's really, really good. Assuming that it's permitted or encouraged within the firm, and we can talk about if it's not, because that's a different situation. How would you advise a younger lawyer to just start thinking about, or maybe actually doing business development and starting to think about their own clients and their own book of business? How do you kind of think about that with your associates?
Yeah, I think we take a very broad view towards business development and developing your own business, and we definitely encourage our associates to do that almost from day one. And the way that we look at it is that everything that you're doing, from court appointments you made ad litem to working with the bar, even having dinner or lunch with another attorney, that I think leads and lays the foundation. Yeah,
no, that's great. And I know not every firm encourages business development in their younger lawyers, but it's good to hear kind of what to do when that is either encouraged. And I know it can be a scary thing for young lawyers to just have to start thinking about that as well. Something else that has been on the minds of, I know as I've counseled law students and now lawyers as well, is the issue of work-life balance. It can kind of be a touchy subject among between partners and associates, and kind of almost can sometimes sound to partners, I think, is code to don't want to work as hard and want to do other things. And to the younger lawyers, it just sounds like kind of that's the way that things ought to be. Where are we with this issue, and kind of how do you communicate with your associates about what's expected from a work work ethic and a kind of commitment standpoint in that context?
I personally think we're still at a point where it's a problem for our profession. We are fortunate at our firm, and Jason and I both came to this firm as associates. We're fortunate that from day one, it was sort of instilled that balance was important, and we've carried that through and try to communicate it as best we can to our associates. But the reality is that when you're in a field that has to do with billable hours and how you collect money based on those billable hours, the more you do, the better in some circumstances. But I think what I would try to point out is that for people who are concerned about it, the firm culture where you're looking to find a job is what you should really be focused on. And that was very clearly communicated when I interviewed with this firm, and it was questions that I had. Both Jason and I have 3 kids each, and what's going on with our family is more important than what's going on at work, quite frankly. And so that's just something to be cognizant of. I think a lot of times we get sucked up when we're thinking about career moves or looking at a firm with everything but that type of culture. So, I mean, if it is important, that should be a focus of what you're looking at when you're going and exploring new options professionally. I don't know what you would say about that, Jason, but I feel that some of that is on, the lawyer who's looking to make a move or to join a firm.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo that and say that if you are a place where you're not happy, make a move. I mean, you're not going to get those years back with your family, and you can make a good living. You can have a happy family life. I mean, it can be done. It is not easy, and there's a lot of pressure on both sides for your time, but you can do it. And if you're in a place where you're not supported or you're not happy, then think about making a change.
Yeah, no, and And that's really good. I mean, we talk a lot about attorneys finding the right fit, and law firms finding when they're searching for attorneys to find those that are the right fit within their culture. And I think a lot of times that's not the first thing that is on the list. And speaking of that, I do want to ask you about when you all are hiring associates. What are a few of the key things that you're looking for, starting with just on paper, like just kind of on a resume? What are some of the things that stand out for you?
Yeah, we see a lot of resumes. Oh, sorry, Michael, go ahead.
Well, no, and we're probably going to start in the same place, but we do see a lot of resumes, and the easiest thing the easiest response to that, Daniel, is that we can start by eliminating people, because you may be very aware of this, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, but written product is important to the practice of law. And so when people are careless with what they submit for consideration when they're looking for a job, unfortunately, those are easily discarded from the pile that is being considered. So if it's a cover letter that has typos, for example, and I'm sure Jason can explore this further, but those, no matter how qualified somebody might be, I might not get to your resume if you've got a cover letter that just wasn't carefully thought out and carefully considered. And that there's a function to that reasoning, because at the end of the day, our work product, what we produce in terms of written work, is very important. If somebody's going to be careless with what they provide to us, that's sort of an easy exclude them from consideration.
Yeah, I can just a couple of specific examples. When I'm looking at cover letters specifically, what always jumps out at me is if it's clear to me through the cover letter the person did not research our firm at all. Examples of that is, we're a trust and estates boutique, and
Right.
we've received cover letters saying that people are really interested in our corporate section or our Dallas office. And it's clear to me then that it wasn't really important enough for them to spend the time to craft a cover letter. Then that is going to problem from creation. And I understand. I remember having to do lots and lots of cover letters, and it is hard to do a unique cover letter for each firm, but I think it's important, and it does stand out to the people who are reading those letters if you have not done your research.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Jason, because not that long ago I was speaking with a partner at a construction law firm, and very similar to the way you just explained it, just so I can make the point that this isn't just you all, it's not an isolated situation, is that same exact thing. They were saying that if they read a cover letter, they read the cover letter first, so they don't even get to the resume yet. If they read the cover letter and construction is not found in the cover letter, then they toss the whole packet. And so it doesn't matter if the person on paper is otherwise off the charts and where they graduated from or how many years, it doesn't matter if they either didn't notice or didn't take the time to figure out that this is a construction law firm. That's all they do. That's who they want. Then it's just, that's it. And so, I think that what you described is more the norm than not, actually.
Yeah. And with resumes, I think once you get past the cover letter and you get to the resume, it needs to be really, be careful with the likes and interest, because we will Google those things. And really that should be where the qualifications, the things like that are. And they should work together, the resume and the cover letter, to give me more information and different information. Don't just repeat things.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's good advice. A lot of times I think people tend to try to just put their resume into some type of narrative form within the cover letter, and rather than have a complementary relationship between the two documents. So I think that's a good thing to point out. So moving on from what's on the paper, what are some things that you look for that maybe can't be found within the paperwork, resume, cover letter, that are important as you guys are moving forward with looking for folks and thinking about who you're going to hire?
Well, I think for us, and this is true of most, if not all, firms our size, but particularly our firm, because it is, the nature of our work is very collaborative. The personality fit really is important, and you can't glean much about someone's personality without sitting down and talking with them. So we really do place a lot of importance on interviews when you get to that stage of considering someone for an associate position. And it's not that you can't be nervous. Everybody gets nervous sometimes, but how do you communicate? Can you, do you have basic social skills? And I hate to put it that way, but it's given what we do and given the nature of our practice, our clients are mostly individuals. You got to be able to talk to people. And you got to be able to communicate clearly. And again, nervousness is fine. That's understandable. In fact, I don't begrudge anybody for being nervous in an interview, but once you sit down and start talking, can somebody clearly get across points to you? And that's sort of the baseline, I think. But then more significantly, our firm culture plays into what we're looking for. Is it somebody who's going to be able to work with X, Y, and Z on the other side of the hall who are tax specific individuals, and they communicate this way. So I mean, we're looking for sort of a holistic attributes of someone who's going to fit into what we have already, because that is important at a firm where you're dealing with 10 or 11 other people on a regular basis. Can you work with them?
Yeah, and one thing for me go ahead, Daniel. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing for me in interviews that I look for is what questions the candidates ask, because that tells me what's important to them. And it also tells me, again, how prepared are they? How much do they know about the firm? What questions they ask tells me a lot, I feel, about what their interest and their focus is. So,
and I'll echo something on that too, Jason. Jason and I have interviewed together quite frequently at law schools and otherwise, and some of the people that we walk away most impressed with are those that ask probing questions. Like, we're talking about their questions afterwards, and that suggests to us that they have prepared, that they've thought about this, that they've thought about their career, or that they thought about a specific practice area. And those kind of things resonate. And again, we walk away still talking about you. That's probably a really positive thing. You've made an impression.
Yeah, I want to stay on that just for another minute or two, because I think it's really important. It's something that I get asked quite a bit. How would you, and maybe an example of each side of this would help, but or just kind of talking through what makes a good interview question from the candidate. What's one that is not as good or is not as impressive. Jason, when you think about the questions that you get asked in interviews that are impressive, that you think about afterwards, what's an example of what those look like versus either questions that are less impressive or actually detrimental to the candidate?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a group of questions a lot of people ask, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad questions. I always think that a good question that people ask is, what is it that you like most about your job? There's variations on that. Take me through your day, something that you did in your job that made you feel good recently. Things like that really get at what do we do on a daily basis. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
And another type of good question, I think, Daniel, is one that shows that interest, but also that has showed that the candidate has done their research on the firm. I remember getting a question about, would it be possible for a law clerk, this was in a summer associate position, would it be possible for a law clerk to work on this treatise by this lawyer at your firm? And so they had done enough research to know that this lawyer wrote this treatise, and it's fairly high profile, but also showed some interest in that particular field. So those types of questions show thoughtfulness. They get at what we do every day and what our lawyers do, but also show that they've done their homework about the firm. And I think you're sort of hearing themes here, right? People who have thought about the particular interview that they're going into. And like Jason said, we recognize that most people who are interviewing for a job are doing multiple interviews. And it's not always easy to tailor every cover letter or every interview question that you're thinking about to a specific firm. But it does stand out when you do it, when you're able to do it. And that, if nothing else, differentiates you from a lot of the other candidates in most cases.
Yeah. What's maybe a candidate who hasn't interviewed since maybe their second year of law school, and now they've been out a few years and are maybe thinking about making a change. From your standpoint as an interviewer, what are maybe a couple of differences that those candidates should be aware of, or maybe a different approach that they should have since they haven't done it in a few years, maybe 4 or 5 even, that they need to think about before they, either start applying for positions or interviewing or anything like that?
I think depending on how long they've been, it may not be intuitive that there is so much that you can find about the lawyers and the firms that you're interviewing with on the internet. There's some more reasons that, definitely when I was in law school, and making sure that you've explored all those avenues before you go into the interview. I also think that when we're interviewing people who are already licensed, have been lawyers for a few years, there is a different level of expectation when it comes to discussing legal issues in the practice area. I mean, especially when we're interviewing litigators, we will want to talk about things that give us a sense of how that lawyer is in the court, what kind of motions they've argued, how many trials, that kind of thing. And so being prepared to really talk a lot more about your practice rather than your education, which would have been the focus in law school because that's all you had.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
I would echo that too. I think that the different expectation is more substance in terms of practice experience, because usually when we're looking to hire a lateral, there's a specific range of experience that we're looking for, and is what you can communicate to us commiserate with our expectations of what someone who's a 4-year estate planning attorney should have, and being able and ready to talk about that is something that I think really differentiates the law school hire from a lateral hire. Yeah,
that's good. Well, I want to, as we start to kind of wind things up here, I want to ask a couple of just broader questions for you guys before we take off. So in your firm and in your practice area specifically, is there anything going on that's around the corner or that's new or just in general that you're looking forward to or concerned about, changes in the law or just anything within the practice area? As you mentioned, your estate planning, fiduciary litigation, all of that. What's going on in this practice area right now?
Well, I think right now, Daniel, we're on the wealth transfer in history. We have a lot of the baby boomers that are aging and getting ready to pass on their wealth to successive generations, and that's a lot of work for us, which is a good thing. But it also brings in situations where there is so much work that sometimes you have people from outside this that dabble, and that can be frustrating for clients, and that can lead to increased costs, especially in litigation. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. Trust and estate issues are going to continue into the future. So I think we feel pretty good about that in terms of job security. But it also it attracts it attracts a lot of people to the practice area that maybe not otherwise are doing it.
Yeah, right.
And that does tie to what I'm excited about in our practice area. I'd echo what Jason said. I think the future looks good for this field, but also related to that, the Texas Board of Legal Specialization is about to be receive a proposal that a new specialization be recognized in Texas for trust and estate litigators, which for us is a pretty exciting thing. I think it shows or demonstrates that field has emerged, and like Jason's saying, in some ways I think it's going to grow, but also that it recognizes that there are people out there doing, and Jason and I are just a couple of them that do this full time or for the majority of our time, and that there needs to be some recognition of people who specialize in that field. So that's pretty exciting, Daniel.
No, that is absolutely. And it's funny, just thinking about the area your area is one that, as I was wrapping up at Baylor, we were spending quite a bit of time on how can we provide more specific fiduciary litigation experience in our third year practice court program, because that is now an area where, and it always has been in some ways, but it's one of the few areas where there's just more of an uptick in the actual litigation practice, trials, all of that.
That's true.
Where so much of the civil stuff has gone away. That's an area that seems to have only grown. So finding ways to do that. Yeah, it's exciting. Well, before I get to our closing rapid fire questions for each of you, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that if there's young lawyers in the audience that listening that you would want to leave them with, or something that you would want to share with them?
I'll start there. I mean, I think particularly if you're looking to make a move, Jason and I both experienced this early in our careers. You have a concept of what you think the practice of law is going to look like. You go to a firm and that practice area is not at all what you anticipated. For me, that was a certain type of litigation. And what I would emphasize that we haven't really talked about is practicing law can be fun. I really, really enjoy what I do. I get to work with Jason, who's a close friend, and other people here at the firm, colleagues that I'm close with, and I enjoy what I do. And so I think that the stress that I would put on this conversation is, if you're not, Jason said this earlier, if there are things that you don't like about where you are, we're definitely out of the era where people stay at a firm for their entire career. I mean,
right.
There's opportunities out there, and I had to look for it. I did not know that trust and estates was something that I would enjoy. And I never took, the proper classes in law school to prepare for that. But practicing law can be fun. You got to go out there and hunt a little bit sometimes and figure it out. Sometimes you cross things off the list before you get to what you like,
Yeah, and I'd say
absolutely
get involved, find things to volunteer and to do that are maybe outside of your comfort zone, especially litigator, find things that feel good, volunteer for an organization where you're contributing and you can make a positive impact, because sometimes it is difficult. It can be either really high highs and really low lows, but if you have other things that you're involved in, I think that's really helpful to get that balance that you're looking for. And that has definitely been the case for me, and I know Michael's too in his career. And those are things that you don't worry about the issues that sometimes arise in litigation. I mean, you're doing something good, and it feels good. I think it revitalizes me, at least. Yeah,
no, that's really, really good. Well, thank you all so much for being with us. We're going to end with the rapid fire questions. Since there's two of you, we'll just I'll do the question, then Michael, you can go, and then Jason, you can give your answer, and we'll go through it that way.
Okay.
If that sounds good. Are we ready?
Yep.
All right. Name the one trait or characteristic you most want to see in an associate.
Dedication.
Thoroughness.
What habit has been key to your success, Michael?
Persistence.
Waking up early.
There you go. Most important app or productivity tool?
Well, this is going to show how my lack of technological savviness, but the smartphone has changed my practice. I was around before smartphones became ubiquitous. Smartphone.
Yeah, I mean that's my answer too. I mean my smartphone, and then all the the little gadgets that go with it, like the watch, being able to look at my watch and check my email. I mean that is very helpful.
There you go.
So.
All right, yeah, the watch. I have not gone to the watch yet, so I'm glad you said that. All right, this is the real serious one here. Favorite legal movie?
Ooh. So it's not a legal movie, but it's on my mind. Knives Out has a 10-minute sequence that deals with our practice area of the law, which was fantastic. So Knives Out.
It's on my list to see, so I'm so glad you mentioned it, and I can't wait to see it.
Highly recommend it.
All right, Jason.
Since I've become a lawyer, I have really found that I hate legal movies and novels, and I don't watch or read them as much because I do that every day. But one movie that actually, when I'm preparing people for depositions, I talk about is The Informant with Matt Damon. There's a scene in that movie where he's about to go up and have his deposition taken, and he looks at his lawyers and he says, "Look, guys, I haven't been completely honest with you, but don't worry, I'm going to clear that up when we get up into my deposition." And that as a litigator, that strikes fear into your heart. But I thought they did a good job in that movie of realistic situations that just take sometimes a horrible turn. So I like that movie.
That's great. Thanks for suggesting that and mentioning it. And I'm trying to remember if I saw it when it came out. I don't know that I did, so I'm going to have to go check that out now. Glad you said it. Well, guys, again, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and for all the wisdom that you shared with these lawyers listening. And I really appreciate you being part of the show. Thanks so much, and best to you in 2020. Happy New Year.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Daniel, very much.
All right, my thanks again to Jason Scott and Michael Knisely of Osborne, Hellman, Nebel, and Scott for joining us on the show. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing two things? One, would you subscribe so that you don't miss an episode? And then also, would you tell your friends in the Texas legal community so we can serve as many of you as possible? We would really appreciate that. And if you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or if I could just help you in any way, please email directly at daniel@varsitysearch.com. As a reminder, don't forget Movie Verdicts with Robert Callahan and me breaking down My Cousin Vinny is in the feed right now, so check that out. Otherwise, we will see you next Monday for another edition of Monday Mentors. So thanks to each of you so much for listening to Lone Star Lawyers. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk to you again next time.